In this video, we are going to be talking about solo travel, and specifically the ways to structure your itinerary and your days when you're solo traveling for the most amount of enjoyment and the least amount of self-doubt and, let's be honest, sometimes fear, because solo travel can be a little bit scary, especially if you haven't done it a ton. So I'm going to be giving you my top tips for maximizing your solo travel experience. Let's dive in. So I'm Kristen if you're new here, and I love to travel, and specifically solo travel too. I've solo traveled to about 4 different countries and also around my home country of the United States. So I've got a bit of experience, and I'm gonna really explain to you what works well for me, because there's a lot of things I tried that haven't worked. And there have been some unsuccessful solo trips that I've taken. So yeah, I'll just be brutally honest with you guys, and we'll have a conversation here, and hopefully it will allow you to maximize your time on your next solo trip. And by the way, if you haven't solo traveled, warning that it is highly addictive. Sometimes, and honestly, don't tell my husband this, but sometimes I prefer to travel without him and just go solo. That is how great it is. So I'm sure once you get experience, you're going to love it, and these tips will help a ton. Tip 1 is to brainstorm a couple of ideal travel days that you've already had, or maybe specific travel experiences that you've had, even if it's with a group of people, because this reflection will allow you to see what you really enjoy about travel and help you to distill those experiences that you want to have more of. So for example, for me, when I started solo traveling and did my first international solo trip in 2018, I reflected back on some travel that I had done a couple years prior. We went to Paris, and I went with my then boyfriend, now husband. And so it wasn't a solo trip, but at that point, I didn't have any prior experience with solo travel. So what I did was I reflected on some of the things I loved about that trip and some of the components that to me make up an awesome travel day. So for example, a lot of our days, we would start by hanging out at a cafe, slowly sipping a coffee, having a pastry, watching the world go by. And honestly, that's something I do pretty much every day on most of my solo travel trips. And that was a little bit redundant. Solo travel trips. Solo trips. There we go. I really enjoy that way to start the day. And then from there, we would often go tour a museum or a free walking tour or some sort of cultural experience. And those are really important things for me to do when I'm traveling. I love museums, love art, love history, which, like, if that's not you, no guilt or shame around that. You've got to do you when it comes to solo travel, because why else would you be there? You're there to enjoy a new experience for yourself. So we would do a cultural experience, and then afterwards, often we would do lunch or go on a long walk or a picnic of some sorts. And then often we would end the night sitting along the River Seine, having a glass of wine and just looking at views, watching the sunset, and enjoying ourselves. So all of these like little components, like the long walks, the cafes, the cultural experiences, museums, walking tours, are all things that I've reflected on that I love. And I've taken these and then used them to build my travel itineraries. So that brings me to tip number 2. My second tip is to create your perfect day formula. So again, what I talked about with the Paris example of taking all those pieces and things that you love to do when you're traveling and brainstorming kind of an ideal travel perfect day for yourself. And it doesn't mean every day is going to and should look like this, honestly. You've got to leave room for spontaneity, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just brainstorm and paint that picture of what that ideal day looks like for you. And write it down. I know it's kind of nerdy, but yeah, get a pencil and paper and write down your ideal travel day formula. Like, for example, morning cafe plus long walk plus cultural experience plus sunset with a drink equals my perfect day formula. So it's as simple as that. And that brings me to tip number 3. Number 3 is to actually do some trip research. And this is very important for solo travel, because when you get there, if you don't know what to do or what you're doing, kind of the fear and anxiety can take over, and you can feel paralyzed by, oh my gosh, I have so many options and I don't even know the first thing that I would be interested in doing in this city. That is why I love a good travel guide. And as you can see, My dude is Rick Steves. So anytime I go to Europe, I get whatever guide he has for that destination because he writes some fabulous guides. So if you're traveling somewhere that doesn't have a Rick Steves guidebook, often a Lonely Planet guidebook or Fodor's could be good enough to give you just kind of that bird's eye view of the place you're traveling and a few of like the main highlights when it comes to to-dos and things to occupy your time with. But from there, you can do a combination of other things. So I like to map out where I'm staying and then look at kind of some of the restaurants around it and what gets high reviews and bookmark it. And then, I just do that all through Google Maps. And I like to look on Pinterest and read blog posts, although sometimes you have to kind of sort through a lot of crap when it comes to that. But more recently, another huge way that I do trip research is through YouTube. So I'll look up where I'm going and watch YouTube videos related to it. I specifically like to watch the YouTube videos created by locals in that area. So you'll see a lot of YouTube videos of travelers that are just there for, 1 to 2 days. But the locals that really know the place and get to spend every day there are going to have the best information. So that's what I do when I do YouTube research. So make a list, research and document kind of some of the places you're hearing about, restaurants, attractions, everything, and just kind of keep a list for yourself. And that will bring me to my next tip, which is to go ahead and craft an itinerary. And I know that a lot of modern travelers don't travel this way anymore. They don't put together a day-to-day activity or activity itinerary, a day-to-day itinerary. And I think that I really thrive when it comes to having an itinerary because I'm not so married to my itinerary. It is basically a fallback plan for me. So if something else comes up that seems more exciting, then I just do that instead. Or if I need to shift things around, easy. I'm not married to it. I can easily do that. But this is where an itinerary comes in handy. There are times when you're solo traveling that you just want to turn your brain off. You're making so many decisions and all of them on your own and like figuring out how to deal with a new country's currency and like hearing a foreign language all day and trying to navigate how to order things and what the cultural norms are and then making every single decision for yourself around, okay, where am I going to eat? Okay, what do I do now? What do I do now? So having that itinerary as a fallback plan so you can just turn your brain off and execute the itinerary is an amazing tool. And I've noticed that sometimes when I leave too many gaps in my itinerary, I fill those with like sitting around and watching Netflix or like getting in my head and just like overanalyzing things. So again, you may not be like me and maybe the idea of an itinerary makes you want to vomit, and that's okay, but this is just a suggestion of what works really well for me. So consider crafting a day-by-day itinerary. And that brings me to my final tip. So my final tip is to do some reflection every single day. And I like to keep a travel journal, and more specifically, I keep that journal on a postcard. So when I'm solo traveling, one of my fun activities is I'll shop for postcards and buy really cool postcards at museum gift shops or, other places I see on the street. And as I'm accumulating those, I will, on the back of the postcard, write my travel diary or journal. And first of all, the major benefit of this is you have something to fill your time with. So if you're solo at a restaurant or a cafe and you feel kind of awkward, you can always pull out your pen and your postcard and just journal. And that frees you up to make sure that you're not in your phone, you're still present, but you have something else to occupy yourself with. But then the other big benefit that I want to shout out here is this reflection time gives you time to really celebrate your wins. So in solo travel, there are times where you may get into your head, especially if you don't have much experience. And by writing down all of the things you've done, all the cool people you've interacted with, all of your experiences, you're going to be celebrating those wins and getting so excited about everything you've accomplished solo by yourself. And that is the best feeling ever and such a confidence builder. And also you can then kind of adjust your itinerary, right? So upon reflection, if a local told you about this really cool place, you can remember, okay, let me squeeze that into my itinerary, or let me see where that is and when the best day to go would be. So that is very important. The reflection piece of all of this is crucial. And honestly, if you're going to take one of my tips, take that one. Do the travel journal even if that's not normally your personality, I think you're going to really enjoy that experience. So I hope you enjoyed this. One final thing before you go, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video and leaving me a comment. The YouTube algorithm can be absolutely brutal sometimes, so this helps me a ton. And thank you so much in advance. I'm excited to talk to you guys next time and chat soon. Bye.